Hey friends, it is Wednesday evening late. It's already dark outside. My name's Tanya and this is She's At It Again. I am going to be making tomorrow a soup that I want to share the recipe with you. This is one of those soups. This is probably one of my top secret recipes, if you will. It's not a secret from me, but it was a secret from the company that had it. So there was a restaurant in Tulsa where we used to live, and the soup was so incredibly good. Everybody that went in the locals all knew about it. It was just a shame. So anyway, I'll tell you the story about it tomorrow, but tonight I want to show you that I've taken some chicken thighs and I'm cooking them in this little tiny crock pot. So I'm just going to cook them low and slow all night so they'll fall apart. And tomorrow, I'll get back with you. We'll restart the video up. I'm going to tell you the rest of that story about that recipe, and we'll have some Full Moon Cafe tortilla soup to cook. We'll see you then. Okay, I just want y'all to see this chicken as I'm taking it out of this little crock pot. I can't even hardly pick it up because it's falling apart. Okay, I'm going to put it in this container, and I'm not quite ready to make the soup yet, only because I don't have the room in the refrigerator to store it, and we're not going to eat it for a couple of days because I'm going to invite friends over to have it with us. So anyway, I just wanted y'all to see that. It has a little, I probably added maybe a fourth to a half a cup of water in the bottom of this little crock pot. And this is only a 6-cup crock pot. It's one of those mini crocks, just those little cheapy, slow cooker. So anyway, like I said, I cooked this on low, and I even turned it down to warm and kept it on warm overnight, but that's what happens to it. It just falls apart. So this is chicken thighs. It's going to be a lot more tender than chicken breast would. So anyway, that'll get us started. Okay, good morning. This is Friday morning, and that was a couple of days ago when I first started cooking the chicken in the little slow cooker, and then yesterday, I think it was yesterday morning, I don't know, this week's kind of chaotic. Yesterday morning, I think I took the chicken out of the slow cooker, I put it in a container, let it cool off, stuck it in the fridge. It is just falling apart delicious. But for this soup recipe, we actually need flour tortillas. Thus the name Tortilla Soup. And so we're going to make flour tortillas. I know I've already done a video on this before, so either bear with me or fast forward through it and just pick up on the soup part. But for right now, I kind of wanted to give you a little hack before I even started. A lot of times I try to gather things together so I'm not running off camera getting things and just being unorganized. I try to get it all in front of me within arm's reach. But I wanted to show you this hack this morning because I could have already gotten all this together in the bowl. But if you buy as much flour as I do, you might or might not, but I buy an incredibly large amount of flour. But I keep it in a bucket with bay leaves in the bottom of it, and I think I might have some neem leaves in there too, I'm not sure. But trying to keep the weevils from the eggs hatching in the flour. It's just, eggs are just in the flour. No matter what you do, you're just going to have eggs in flour. And if it sits in a warm atmosphere, particularly a warm, humid atmosphere, the eggs are going to hatch. You're going to get weevils in your flour. You cannot store flour in an airtight container and think, oh, there's not going to get a bug in it. Well, it's not that bugs are getting in it. They're already in there. They're just in an egg stage, and they hatch from that. Now, you can cook the flour in the oven. You can actually bake it for an extended, not a long period of time, but get it to a certain temperature and it'll kill those eggs. You cannot freeze it and it make the eggs not hatch. It's just going to happen. Sorry, it's a fact of life. It's just nature. But what I try to do is rotate my flour. So I'm going to use the oldest one that I have first. I probably have, it's an embarrassing amount almost. I probably have at least 25 pounds of flour in the pantry right now, but I keep it in a food safe bucket with a lid on it with those bay leaves and neem leaves inside there. But what I do when I get home from the supermarket is I write the date on the top. Just grab a Sharpie marker and I write the date on it so I'll know that I bought this one furthest along. In other words, I bought this one the 18th of January. Right now it's March. And so I have others. I just bought a couple more bags the other day, so I dated those the beginning of March. So what I do is I take and date those so I can use, like I said, the oldest one first, kind of like they do in the supermarket anyway. They rotate things. They bring the older ones to the front, put the newer items in the back, so they'll be sure and sell out of the older items first. So that's the hack right there. So that part's done with. So I'm going to take my flour. I don't know that I have 3 cups of flour in this container. Sorry for all the noise of the sack. I keep this in a glass container because if I kept it in an opaque container that I couldn't see the flour in, I would panic, open it up, knowing I have a time limit to make something, which isn't uncommon here, and then go, oh, I don't have enough flour in there. What do? I have to open a bag up. So I keep this. I have my 3 glass containers over there, and it has items in it that I know that without a doubt I have enough to do what I'm going to do. So right now, for our flour tortillas, I'm going to put 3 cups of this in here. This is, again, just plain organic flour. And on the stove, I have a cup of water and 3 tablespoons of butter in a saucepan, and it is heating up. Okay, let me get this back over there on the other counter. I've got the burner up pretty high. To our 3 cups of flour, I am going to add 1 3/4 teaspoons of salt. Now again, you're in luck if you're a rookie tortilla maker. These tortillas don't have to be perfect. We're going to wind up cutting them in strips, baking them until they're crisp, and that's going to be the topping for our tortillas. If you need to go buy store-bought tortillas, that's totally up to you. Just know you're going to likely have an inferior product to a homemade one. Of course, you knew I was going to say that, but a lot of times they're made with bleached flour, and I cannot for the life of me, since our Kroger is no longer here in our town, I can't find just a regular supermarket that carries organic flour tortillas. And any of them that I've seen in the stores, in our big box stores here, are made with bleached flour. All right, to that flour mixture, I'm just waiting for my butter to melt real quick. But I have my shower cap ready to put on the bowl as soon as I get it stirred up. Now I'm going to mix this all up, and then I'll let it rest for maybe 30 minutes to an hour. In the meantime, I'm going to go walk the dogs as soon as I get this ready to rest. That'll give me just enough time. All right, this is boiling. So when I say you need hot water, you need it to the point of where it's pretty much boiling. My butter, there's just a little tiny blob of it in there. So I'm going to make a well in the center of this. There's my cute little pan again, my little stainless steel pan. That's my Goodwill find. I'm so proud of that thing. All right, we're going to pour this right in the middle. Make sure my burner's off. This just makes the funnest dough to play with. This is the part where if you have young kids anywhere around, neighbors, grandkids, kids of your own, a husband that acts like a kid and just wants to get in the kitchen and play with the food, then this is a fun project for them. Flour tortillas are always fun, and they never go to waste because even, I mean, you might not use 12 tortillas to cut up in strips, but you might. This soup is just that good. You might not use that many tortillas just for the soup, but just for sandwiches and wraps, and I mean, we just really like them. Now these tortillas are, again, they're going to have more flavor than your average tortillas that you might find in a store because these are made with butter. You're not going to find a tortilla made with butter probably anywhere that I know of. I don't even know of a Mexican restaurant that makes them with butter. They normally use lard or some type of oil. So let's get the rings off. I'm going to work this with my hands a bit.
as crazy as it sounds, I know this video probably will not come out until April, May, somewhere around in May, and the weather's probably beautiful by the time this comes out. But today we have fabulously sunny weather outside here in central-ish Arkansas, but it's supposed to start snowing at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Now, Oklahoma, I watch Oklahoma news because I have so many friends and some family that still lives in Oklahoma, and it is just snowing like a maniac in Oklahoma right now. The roads are hazardous, and I look outside here and think, how can they be like a 6-hour drive away? And it's just so different, but that's just how weather happens. That's just how God makes it. You can't make it rain everywhere, and we're told that, but it's just so funny that it's so sunny and beautiful here and so yucky there. But it's moving in. I don't think that it's supposed to be a long snow as far as snowing for days. And I don't even think the roads are supposed to get bad. But nevertheless, they say we're going to have big fluffy snow. Okay, just enough to where you can get that dough off the bowl. Wrap it in a ball, and the condensation from the heat of this dough is going to collect on the top of this shower cap. Then you just tap it, knock it right back into it, and it gives it a really good consistency. Don't let your dough be too dry. You don't want it crumbly and dry because they are too hard to roll out. I started out making tortillas like that years ago, and I thought, this is wearing me out. I'm too big of a weenie to roll out tortillas. And then I figured out all I had to do was add more butter or water and make it a softer dough. And they're perfectly fine. They're not hard to roll out at all. They're actually fun to roll out. Okay, we're going to cover this up. Let that rest for anywhere from 30 minutes to even a couple of hours is fine. So you just want that dough to relax. That way when you roll it out, it doesn't start coming back together again. It's actually going to stay rolled out. So I'm going to turn the camera off. We'll be back to make some tortillas, and then we'll make our soup later on. Okay, we are ready to roll out our flour tortillas. I'm not going to video the whole rolling out a dozen or so of them, but I just want you to get the gist of it if you haven't watched the other video. So we've walked the doggies. We've moved some plants around. Of course, it's spring and I've got seeds germinating. I'm growing strawberries, tomatoes, peppers, and to get a strawberry seed to germinate is so exciting. So I have to video it and send it to my daughter and send it to my sister and send it to my friends. It just doesn't take much to get me excited when it comes to growing things from seed. So okay, the dough's still just a tad warm, but not so warm you can't handle it, of course. Let's get a little bit of flour and put on our countertop. Okay, let me make sure I have this in the camera view. Okay, yeah, you can see it. All right, we're going to divide this up into segments. You don't want it to dry out too much when you're working with it, so I usually try to divide it up into segments and then put them back in the bowl. The ones I'm not working with right then, to keep them from drying out. We're going to have 12 segments here, so each one of these, each one of the fourths I'll divide into 3. Like I said, they do not have to be perfect. I said that a while ago. I'll say it again. They do not have to be perfect because you're going to be cutting these up into strips anyway. So we'll put our shower cap up. Look at the condensation that built up on the inside of that shower cap. That's a lot of moisture. That'll keep it nice. All right, just kind of flatten these out with your hands at first. Don't over flour your countertop. There's really not a lot of need for it. You just want them to be able to come off the countertop when you're ready for them to. I have my skillet heating up. You don't want your skillet just steaming hot, but you want it hot enough to where these will fry pretty quick. I have a towel over there, just a lint-free kitchen towel, and I'm going to put them inside that instead of my tortilla keeper. I try to do that with corn tortillas, put them in that tortilla storage container, but with flour tortillas, just inside of a towel is fine. If you don't have a rolling pin, I know this sounds crazy, but my grandmother, my Nana, said when they first got married, of course she always has to stress how poor they were. Yes, I get it. You were very, very poor. She said none of her family or any of her friends could afford a rolling pin. That was something that fancy rich people had. So she said that my granddad cut the handle of her broom when the straw or the bristles of it kind of wore out. She couldn't use the broom anymore. She said that he cut the handle up to where she could use it as a rolling pin, and I think I want to say she had that when I was a kid, because I kept thinking there's no little handles on it. What's wrong with your rolling pin? And she said, well, it's not a rolling pin, it's a broom handle. So if you don't have a rolling pin, you're welcome to cut your broom up. I mean, lucky you if you have one with a wooden handle, but they don't make a lot of those anymore. But yeah, just think twice before you use a glass or anything like that, because if you press too hard and that glass breaks, you have ruined some tortillas, because you're not going to want to eat them with that glass in there. Skillet's heating up nicely. My skillet is not truly a dry skillet, even though I would encourage you to use a dry skillet. Mine just has kind of a bacon grease, I guess, in there from where I cooked cornbread last time, and I just stuck it back in the lower oven. That's where I store my skillet. And so it would not normally be shiny with grease, but it has it in there. It's not going to hurt the tortillas by any means. All right, let's see if this is hot. See if a light will help. And we'll put our first tortilla in the skillet. I can hear it sizzling, so that's a good thing. All right, when you see the little bubbles in the tortilla, it's time to flip it over. All right, when you get brown marks on it like that, just the little freckles on it, it's time to put it in the towel and put another one on the skillet. This is not hard. I would say you'd have to try really hard to mess up a tortilla unless you just burned it in the skillet or something like that. But this is one of those things, if you're a rookie baker, this is definitely the thing to try. So don't rush out to the store to buy flour tortillas. Just give this a try if at all possible. All right, we will come back later on. I'll have the tortillas made and we will make some soup. Okay, here we go with our soup. Finally, after all that. All right, I just turned my burner on underneath my stock pot, kind of about a medium high, And we are going to make a roux right now because this is a thick and creamy soup. So we're going to start with 1 stick of butter, which is a 1/2 cup. And don't start with a small stock pot. I think this one is a 6-quart stock pot, so you're going to need probably at least that big of a stock pot. This makes a good batch, but once you taste it, you'll go, oh, I'm glad I made that much. Don't trick yourself into thinking, I don't need that much tortilla soup. Now, I've been to Mexican restaurants where I've ordered tortilla soup thinking it was going to be like this tortilla soup, and it was not. It was a little disappointing because it was like a clear broth, had some chicken floating in there, and it wasn't cheesy, it wasn't creamy, it wasn't thick. It was just a broth, and it had a few tortillas scattered on the top. That was not what I was expecting, but Full Moon Cafe definitely had us spoiled. Now, I honestly do not know if all their locations are still open. I know in Tulsa they closed down the one that was centrally located in the, I believe in the Paseo district, and I think I've been to all of them there. But it was one of my favorite restaurants when we lived in Tulsa. It was such a treat to go. I cannot even tell you how excited I got when I knew I was going to go there to get a bowl of this soup. Now, normally I don't go to a restaurant thinking, ooh, a bowl of soup, and get all excited, but that was different. And the story behind this is, okay, to this we're going to add a 1/2 cup of flour also. I'm just eyeballing this, but I think I know what a 1/2 cup looks like. 1/2 cup of our plain organic flour. And we're going to brown this just a bit. So just keep stirring it. It's going to turn into a paste. So the story goes, everybody loves Full Moon Cafe tortilla soup so much, and apparently they had so many requests from customers for the recipe, so of course people could make it at home. They're probably going broke because they got addicted to the silly stuff. And so Full Moon Cafe decided to put a hush to the asking. So apparently they contacted the Tulsa World, which was our local newspaper in Tulsa, and said, here's the recipe, just publish it, tell people shut up. So, probably not in those words, but just so they'll quit asking. Well, I took one look at that recipe, and I'm here to tell you, there's certain things, if you know much about cooking at all, and I know about this much about cooking, and particularly back then too. I mean, I like it, but I'm just not super smart when it comes to it. But I looked at that recipe and went, no way. They have left out items out of this recipe. There is no way that is the recipe to their soup. I am not dumb. Don't play me for that. So I messed with it enough to where I think I got it. I'm pretty excited to say, if you are a fan or were a fan of their tortilla soup, I would say if you make this, you will be so excited, because it tastes so much like what I remember it tasting like. They left out obvious ingredients to me, but if you're not from the South, you may not have picked up on those particular spices and ingredients and herbs that they've left out. Okay, so to this mixture, to that roux, it's going to be bubbly. It's going to start turning brown. Go ahead and add a 1/2 teaspoon of ground white pepper to that. If you don't cook a lot, you might not have white pepper in your pantry, but I would say it's worth having. But this can be found at your local big store. Just a 1/2 teaspoon of that. Now, this is not a super spicy soup, so don't think that even though we're going to be putting jalapenos in it and you've got the white pepper in it, but it's not super spicy. All right, also to that, we're going to add a mixture of a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1/2 teaspoon of chili powder. I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon of lime peel, and what I did was I used my rasp. This just zests things. So I took this lime. It looked like a regular lime. It looks naked now, but I took it and just got lime peel off that. So it keeps it in this little plastic part. I didn't figure you wanted to take your time and watch me zest a lime no more than I think you want me to watch me grate cheese. That's why I always grate the cheese ahead of time, or I try to. So get our lime peel in there. And then we're going to cut this lime in half and use the juice. I'm going to see how juicy this one is. This is kind of a small lime. So we need about 1/2 teaspoon of lime juice. I'm going to use the juice from both of these halves because it's not that big. If you've got a big juicy lime, I would say probably half the lime would be fine. Limes do not have seeds like lemons do, so you don't have to worry about catching the seeds out of it. They're a little bit more user-friendly, I would say. I see a jalapeno seed. I don't want the seed in there. All right. Keep stirring this, and you'll see that it's browning. Let me tip this pot over. Hopefully you can see that that's browning in there. And don't panic. Just don't have your heat up super high. I only have mine on about medium to medium-low heat. We don't want to scorch it, but we want it to brown pretty good. That's where a lot of the flavor comes from. To this, we're also going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. Let's grab a teaspoon. And we're going to add 1 tablespoon of sage. This is what they left out when they published the recipe in the newspaper. I don't think there was any sage mentioned, and that was the dead giveaway that something was missing. So we have rescued it and we've added it back. This just smells really, really good right now. Okay, to this we are going to add 1/2 gallon of chicken stock. Now, if you've seen my video on making your own chicken stock, bone broth, chicken broth, you'll probably have some stored in your refrigerator by now, hopefully. But if not, if you're one of those people that just don't have room for it, or you just weren't interested in that kind of thing, you can buy chicken broth or chicken stock in the store. Just try to buy some without any MSG in it. Your body will thank you for it. It's not one of those things that a lot of people connect with having headaches and some issues, but it really is the cause of a lot of things like that that people are unaware of. Now this, I want you to look at this bone broth. Let me make sure you can see this. This almost looks like Jell-O in here. Not even kidding. That's what the good bone broth looks like when you've made it right. This would be probably the first batch. You know, I use it 3 times before I ever discard the chicken bones or grind them up, use them for something else. But that's what really good chicken stock or chicken bone broth looks like, is that gelatinous texture. So I'll use the liquid from the second jar of bone broth, which isn't quite as gelatinous. It is a little bit, but not quite as much. So that's probably my batch 3 right there. To get some of this out of the jar. And you can pour it on there slowly and whisk it into that roux mixture, but it's really not going to matter a whole lot because you're going to keep cooking this for a bit, so it'll thicken up. You just got to get the lid and shake the jar. So again, that's half gallon. We had 2 quart jars of chicken stock that we used. We're going to stir this until it gets a bit thicker. You can turn your heat back up at this point. There's no chance of it scorching too much, so we just want to get it thick at this point. I don't know if turning a light on will help you see this or not. Maybe. I'll leave that on. Hopefully it helped. So once I finish making this soup for you right now, I will set it aside to let it cool down, and then when we get ready to serve this, right ahead of time, I will make the tortilla strips, and I will video that part as well, so that's to follow. But the way you serve this is, of course, you ladle out the soup in a bowl, and then you put tortilla strips on top of it, just a small handful. But now, I'm from the South, and my family really likes these tortilla strips, and I warn people, do not start eating the tortilla strips before you serve the soup, because you will have to make another batch of tortilla strips. They're just that fun to eat. They're really nice. I think perhaps a lot of people, and I think the restaurant where I ate this first, I think they fried their tortilla strips in, like, deep fry them in oil, but I don't do that. I just toss them around in a bag of a little bit of olive oil in a zip top bag, and then I bake them on a baking sheet, and they bake up so crisp and beautiful, and they're not all greasy, drippy with an oily flavor at all. But like I said, I'm from the South, and my family really likes these, so sometimes we have been known to make a double batch of tortilla strips for one batch of soup, because my family's idea of this soup is to put a big giant handful of tortilla strips in a bowl and then put the soup over it, kind of like gravy over a biscuit. Like I said, we really do like our tortilla strips. But this was one of those soups, once I figured out how to replicate the taste of what Full Moon Cafe had it, I had to share it with my sister, who did not live in Tulsa and was unaware of this lovely soup. And then, of course, we had to share it with my other relatives that at the time I lived in Tulsa, my sister was in Oklahoma City, and my other relatives were in Memphis, Eastern Arkansas, places like that. So by the time it was all said and done, everybody had the recipe, everybody was making it, and probably everybody's tasted a little bit different, and we were certainly eating it a lot differently too. And I think everybody enjoyed it, so that was kind of fun. All right, we're going to let this thicken up a bit. We'll just let it cook for a while, and when it starts getting thick, we'll come back and add our remaining ingredients to it. In the meantime, I'll get some stuff cleaned up. Okay, we brought our mixture up to a boil, and it's not going to get super thick like a pie filling or anything like that, but you can obviously tell it's getting a little bit thicker, and it will also thicken up when we add the cheese and just the other stuff, and when it cools off, it'll thicken up too. So I've got this chicken that, I'll show you that. That's what I took out of the slow cooker yesterday. We're going to add that. Now, if you just have chopped rotisserie chicken or something like that, I know a lot of people use that shortcut. Then if that's what you want to use, then that's what you want to use. Put that in there. We're going to go with about 2 cups of this. You can put more or less. It's okay with me if it doesn't have big chunks of chicken, but I know I had somebody voice some concern one time when I catered something, and they said, well, I thought this was a chicken tortilla soup. Well, it is, but it's not just a blob of chicken. So I don't mind a lot of chicken being in there, but I'm not going to panic if there's not a lot in there. So this is, I probably have 2 to 3 cups of chicken. That's just what the chicken thighs wound up, the amount it came to after I cook it. The thighs just seem to be more moist when I cook them, and they just retain their moisture, unlike chicken breast, which chicken breast is fine, and that's what I used to use in this, but it just seems like it's like a dry morsel of chicken as opposed to a really moist morsel of chicken. That's just the difference in it. Okay, we're also going to add about 2 teaspoons of diced pickled jalapenos. Now, I'll show you the jar in just a moment so you can see what I'm using. Sometimes I buy organic ones. These are not. These are just this brand right here. I've used the last out of the jar, but just bought that at the big store, and they're really good. So just dice those up as small as you think you want them. We're also going to put in a can of diced tomatoes with green chilies, affectionately known as Rotel tomatoes, but make sure you get the diced kind. You can get the Rotel brand if you want. I just choose these. It's just, I think, a smarter choice, and the cost isn't that different, I don't think. I don't really remember thinking, wow, these are just so much more expensive. Some people just assume organic is more expensive. Sometimes I go in the store, it's funny because like every once in a while, our big store in town will have organic bananas, and they're actually cheaper than the conventional ones, but I will hear parents tell their kids, they'll send their kids over to the bin to get bananas, and the kids will start to pick up organic ones, and they'll say, no, we don't want those, they're too expensive. And I'm thinking, look at the price. It's actually less than the conventional ones. So for some reason in our mind, the general public just thinks, oh, organic equals expensive, too expensive, more expensive, whatever, but more expensive than conventional. That's not always the case. So I don't think there's an exorbitant difference in the two of these. So I would always choose organic over the kind that probably has pesticides, possibly herbicides, and other synthetic fertilizers on it. But you're the one going to eat it, and it's your choice, so I'll let you make that call. Okay, so the whole can of the diced tomatoes and green chilies. We're going to also add, this calls for a cup, but hey, it's cheese. Of course, I'm going to add more. That's just the nature of the beast. It's cheese. So I just added, this calls for cheddar and Monterey Jack mix. So I shredded what I had left of my little block of cheddar, and then I shredded the rest of it in Monterey Jack, and that will fulfill all the needs of those two cheeses together. I believe that the cheddar I used was either sharp cheddar or extra sharp cheddar. I can't remember, but either of those will be fine. And the last thing we're going to add to this is 2 cups of milk. I kind of want the cheese to get melted a bit, and then the milk, once I take this off the burner, I'll put the milk in, and that will help it cool down because it's going to go back in the refrigerator anyway. We're not serving this today. We'll probably serve it in a day or two. And like I said, of course, invite friends over to enjoy it with us. Once I can stir it around and see that there's no more shreds of cheese in there, then it'll be fine. That chicken, like I said earlier, I cooked it in that slow cooker, and once the mixture started bubbling that night, I probably had maybe 1/4 to 1/2 cup of water in it, so not a lot at all. And the chicken was completely cooked, but I just turned it down on warm and kept it warm all night. But the bad thing about it is I kept waking up all night going, did I leave something on the burner? Because I kept smelling something. I knew it was chicken. But when I got up the next morning, it was just honestly falling apart. And you can see that it's just like shreds of chicken in there. So that's going to be really nice. Okay, I think all my cheese is pretty much melted. So I'm going to turn this burner off and then slowly pour the milk in there just so it won't curdle on us. I'm going to move it off the burner a bit. All right. Guys, I'm telling you, this might be your new favorite soup. If you had a favorite, well, that may not be your favorite anymore. And I realize that this is out of the camera. Let me see if I can scoot this camera back just a tad so you can see this. There we go. I don't want it on the burner anymore because I don't want it to continue to heat. All right, so we'll come back in a bit and in the next segment, and I will show you about cutting up the tortillas and baking those off in the oven, and then we'll show you the final product, of course, at the end. So hang in there with us. We'll be right back. The next step of getting ready for our Full Moon Cafe tortilla soup. And these are our tortillas. I just have them stored in a zip top bag. These are the ones we made yesterday. There's several ways to cut these. You can get out a pair of kitchen shears and cut these in strips. You only want to cut them maybe as wide as 1/2 inch. You can cut them smaller than that though if you want to. You can use a pizza wheel on each one, or you can just use a chef's knife and just cut them in strips as thin as you can. Sometimes a lot depends on the texture of them. If they're just too thick or tough or something, I'll use the kitchen shears, but normally a knife works fine. And I need to go ahead and preheat my oven. Let's turn that on to about 375. And if some of these strips are too long from your tortillas being pretty wide, then you can just cut those in half. There's really no right way to do it. I just go along with what I've seen them done at the restaurant itself. But if you can get some fancy little thin ones that look like shoestring potatoes, then good for you. But I'm usually in too big of a hurry, or my hand's not steady enough or something. But keep in mind, the rule is don't start eating these once they come out of the oven, or I promise you, you will not have any left for the soup. They're just that good. You might go ahead and make a double batch of these, just to be on the safe side. I'm warning you. So we'll do these in batches. And instead of putting the tortilla strips in a bag or a container, I'm going to put the oil in there first. So in other words, instead of pouring the oil on the tortilla strips. I'm going to put the oil in there, kind of get the bag oily. I don't want all the oil going on some of the tortilla strips and then some of them not getting any. So I'd rather do it this way. There's probably a science to it. I'm just not smart enough to know what it is. But I'll just say we're going to do it this way. This is how I normally do it. But I have seen people put them in a bowl and kind of shake them around with the oil in it, or even try to drizzle them with oil on the baking sheet, and that just doesn't work very well because some of them are naked. They don't get any oil at all, and I kind of feel sorry for those inanimate objects. Every strip needs just a little tiny bit of oil to get that crispness to it. But you want to get these to a consistency of kind of like the consistency of a potato chip, I guess. I mean, you don't want them to burn or anything, but you want them to be crispy, even though they're going to get soggy once you leave them in the soup for a while. But they are so delicious even when they get soggy. And some of you might be wondering, can you use corn tortillas? Sure, go right ahead. But if you're worried about being gluten-free, you've already put flour in your soup, so that part's not gluten-free. But if you just had rather have corn tortillas, then go right ahead. I've just never had it with corn tortillas, but if that's how you want to serve it, then you go right ahead. It may be absolutely fabulous. I still haven't made up my mind when I want to serve this soup. Probably tomorrow if we invite somebody over after church. But I'm just thinking, tonight's when we turn our clocks, move our clocks forward, and I'm going to lose an hour of sleep, and am I going to be coherent enough to even heat this up after church tomorrow? And it's not the staying awake long enough to heat it up, but it's sitting at the table and visiting, because we always visit for hours and hours after we have guests over for lunch, and it's so much fun, and I don't want to sit there and be dozing off while everybody's trying to visit. I love, love, love sleep so much, and it seems like I require about as much as a baby now, but the day you move your clocks forward is not really a good time to experiment with having guests over, but it's not like I'm experimenting. We have guests over quite a bit. And there goes my phone with a text, because every time I start filming, if I'm not filming with that phone, then whatever phone I'm not filming with gets text on it. All right, so you can see how we're doing this. Pretty much just cutting these in thin strips like that. And we're going to put them in a bag and toss them around. I think I'm only going to do part of the tortillas for right now. I don't know, I may change my mind and do more in a bit. But we'll just get the oil from that bag all over the strips. And make sure you put them in a nice, kind of an even layer on the baking sheet. Let's bring that around. And you don't have to have your oven preheated all the way to put these in there. You just put them in there and let them bake away. Oops, we have some conjoined ones. I need to pull those apart. And you do want to sprinkle a bit of salt on these before you put them in there, because it's a lot easier for salt to stick to ones with oil on it than it is to wait till after it's baked to try to get it to stick, because that salt will just bounce off. And the finer the salt, the better. Give it a little shower. Okay, so they're going to look like that. If you need to do, if you make enough to where you need to put it in 2 different trays, go right ahead and do that. That's certainly not going to be a deficit to your account. You just want them to get exposed to that heat as much as they can in the oven. Okay, we're going to put these in the oven when it preheats, and then we'll come back and I'll let you see the crispiness of these. And then this will not be the final one because we still have to show you what it looks like when we're about to serve it. So we'll be right back. Okay, these have been in there for about, I would say 12 to 13 minutes. At the 10-minute mark that I set my oven for, my phone rang and I had to talk. So these look just perfectly browned and they are sizzling. I think you can hear them. So this is what they're going to look like. That's hot. And you could hear the snap. So that's what they're going to sound like. Let these cool. Don't put them in a bag right away because the condensation will make them soggy again. Just leave them like this till they cool off completely. Then you can put them in an airtight container. And then we're going to top our soup with it whenever we serve that up. So that'll be the next thing you see.
I'm sure you're taking that off.
There we go.